Before we begin tonight's story, if you're enjoying these accounts from the wilderness, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps us bring you more of these encounters from the forgotten corners of America's national forests. And I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Now, let's talk about Mount Shasta. I am Miko Wilson. Before I tell you about this strange incident, I worked as a park ranger at Mount Shasta for over 8 years. Before I convinced myself that all of this was a hallucination caused by the altitude and lose my courage, I must tell this story. But I know very well what I saw, I know what I heard. And I know exactly what is still waiting there beneath the 14,000 feet of volcanic rock. It was September of 1988 when I first heard the bells. I'd been stationed at the Mount Shasta Ranger District since 1982, fresh out of college with a geology degree and a romantic notion about protecting wilderness. The reality was less romantic, mostly dealing with unprepared hikers, issuing permits, and explaining to spiritual seekers that no, they couldn't camp on the summit to commune with the Lemurians. Mount Shasta attracts a particular kind of visitor. Sure, there are the regular hikers and climbers, people who just want to summit a beautiful mountain, but Shasta also draws what we called the seekers, people who believed the mountain was hollow, that an ancient civilization called Telos existed inside it, that enlightened beings lived in crystal cities beneath our feet. I'd heard every theory. Underground UFO bases, dimensional portals, the lost continent of Lemuria. After 6 years, I'd learned to nod politely and keep my skepticism to myself. The thing about Mount Shasta is that it does feel different. Even a rationalist like me couldn't deny it. The way lenticular clouds form around the peak like flying saucers, the strange lights people photograph, the statistically improbable number of missing person cases. David Paulides would later write about some of them in his Missing 411 books, but in 1988, we just called them tragedies and tried not to think about the patterns. It was a Tuesday morning when Isa Morrison, my fellow ranger, came into the station with a strange report. Isa was 10 years my senior, a veteran of the Park Service who'd seen everything. She didn't rattle easily. "Got a weird one, Miko," she said, dropping a file on my desk. 3 separate hikers called in last night. All reported hearing bells. Bells coming from inside the mountain. They described it as metallic, harmonic, like church bells, but deeper. Lasted about 20 minutes around midnight. I picked up the file and scanned the reports. The hikers had been in different locations. One on Avalanche Gulch, one near Bunny Flat, one on the Clear Creek route. Too far apart to have heard the same source, unless that source was very loud and very deep. "Wind through the lava tubes?" I suggested. "We've had strange acoustic phenomena before." "That's what I thought, except—" Isa hesitated. "I heard them too, last night at my cabin. I live 5 miles from the mountain, Miko. Whatever made that sound, it was big." I looked at her carefully. Isa wasn't the type to buy into Shasta mysticism. If she said she'd heard something, she'd heard something. "Did you record it?" "Tried, but it didn't pick up on my tape recorder. Just static, like the frequency was wrong somehow." That should have been my first warning, but I was young and confident in my scientific education. There had to be a rational explanation. Acoustic anomalies. Maybe seismic activity. Mount Shasta was a volcano, after all. Dormant, but not dead. "I'll look into it," I told her. "Probably just the mountain settling." Isa gave me a look that said she didn't believe that any more than I did, but she let it go. That night, I stayed late at the ranger station going through old reports. I found 3 instances in the past 15 years where hikers had reported similar sounds. Bells, chimes, harmonic tones coming from deep within the mountain. Each time, the reports had been dismissed as auditory hallucinations caused by altitude or fatigue. But each time, about 2 weeks after the bell sounds, someone went missing on the mountain. I was still at the station when my radio crackled at 11:47 p.m. "Base, this is Summit 1. We've got a situation." Summit 1 was the call sign for the emergency shelter near the summit. It was manned during climbing season by volunteers who could respond to injuries or weather emergencies. "Go ahead, Summit 1. We're hearing, I don't know how to describe this, bells, big bells, coming from below us. The whole shelter is vibrating." I grabbed my radio. "Can you get a recording?" Trying, but the transmission cut to static. When it came back, the volunteer's voice was shaking. "Jesus, you need to hear this. It's not just bells. There's a pattern. It's like a language." "Stay inside the shelter. I'm coming up." I grabbed my gear and headed for my truck. The drive to the trailhead took 30 minutes, and the hike to the summit shelter would take another 4 hours. But I had to hear this for myself. As I drove, I called Isa on the radio. She was already awake. "I heard them again," she said. "Mikkel, they're louder than last night, much louder." "I'm heading up to Summit 1. Want to meet me at Bunny Flat?" "Already on my way." We met at the trailhead at 12:30 a.m. and started the climb by headlamp. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the thin air. Mount Shasta loomed above us, a perfect volcanic cone silhouetted against the Milky Way. We were at about 8,000 feet when we heard them, the bells. I stopped in my tracks, Isa beside me. The sound was coming from below us, from inside the mountain. Deep, resonant, harmonic. It wasn't like church bells at all. It was more like the ringing of crystal, if crystal could be the size of buildings. The tones overlapped, creating harmonics that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. "Recording," Isa said, pulling out her equipment. But like before, the recorder picked up nothing but static. The sound lasted exactly 7 minutes. Then it stopped, cutting off so abruptly that the silence felt violent. "What the hell was that?" Isa whispered. I didn't have an answer. Everything in my geological education told me this was impossible. Sound didn't work this way. Acoustic phenomena didn't create perfect harmonic tones, and they certainly didn't seem to be coming from miles beneath solid rock. We continued climbing, reaching the summit shelter at 4 a.m. The volunteer, a college kid named Jake, looked like he'd seen a ghost. "It stopped about 20 minutes ago," he said. "But before it did, I swear I heard voices. Under the bells, singing, maybe, or chanting." "Did you recognize the language?" I asked. "No, but I studied linguistics in school. It wasn't anything modern. The phonemes were all wrong. Too many vowels, consonants that don't exist in any language I know." We stayed at the shelter until sunrise, hoping the bells would return. They didn't. As the sun came up, painting the summit in shades of gold and pink, I looked down at the mountain's southern face and saw something that made me freeze. There was a climber, about 1,000 feet below us, on a route that no one should have been on. He was moving laterally across the face, not up or down, and he was moving fast. Too fast for safety. "Isa, you see that?" She pulled out her binoculars. "Yeah, what's he doing? That's not an established route." I watched through my own binoculars. The climber was in modern gear, bright blue jacket and pants. But something was wrong with his movements. They were jerky, uncoordinated, like he was being pulled by strings. Then he disappeared. Not into a crevasse or behind a rock feature. He was there, and then he wasn't. Like he'd walked through a door that didn't exist. "Did you see that?" Isa's voice was barely audible. "Yeah." "Where did he go?" "I don't know." We scrambled down to the location, but it took us 3 hours to reach it safely. The spot where the climber had disappeared was just a blank rock face, solid stone. No caves, no crevasses, no openings of any kind. But in the snow at the base of the wall, we found footprints. They led right up to the rock and stopped. Isa touched the stone. "It's warm." She was right. The rock was warmer than it should have been, like something had generated heat recently. And there was a smell. Faint, but distinct. Ozone and something else. Something like burnt cinnamon. We spent the rest of the day searching the area and came up with nothing. No climber, no explanation. That night, we filed a missing person report for an unknown individual. Description: blue jacket, last seen on the southern face. The report went nowhere. No one matching that description had filed a climbing permit. No vehicles were unaccounted for at any trailhead. The climber, whoever he was, didn't officially exist. 3 days later, a hiker named David Castle went missing. David was an experienced mountaineer, someone who knew Shasta well. He'd summited it 17 times. He'd filed a solo permit for a 3-day climb via the Avalanche Gulch route, and when he didn't check in on day 4, his wife called us. The search started immediately. Isa and I led the effort, retracing David's planned route. We found his camp at 9,000 feet, perfectly set up, his sleeping bag still in the tent. His pack was there, his food, his water. But David was gone, and on the ground next to his tent we found his camera. I picked it up carefully. It was a nice Nikon, expensive. The film inside was partially exposed. I had it developed that afternoon at a shop in Mount Shasta City, paying extra for a rush job. When I got the photos back, my hands started shaking. The first 15 pictures were normal. David's drive up, the trailhead, shots of the mountain from various angles as he climbed. Beautiful photography, the work of someone who loved this place. Picture 16 showed his camp at 9,000 feet. Sunset, the tent set up, everything normal. Picture 17 showed a hole in the rock face. Not a cave, not a natural formation, a doorway. Perfectly rectangular, about 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, carved into solid stone. The edges were smooth, almost polished, and there was light coming from inside. Not firelight or electric light. This was different. Crystalline, blue-white and pulsing. Picture 18 showed the same doorway but closer. David must have walked right up to it. The light was brighter here, and I could see something inside. Geometric patterns on the walls, and what looked like writing. Picture 19 was the last one on the roll. It showed David's hand reaching toward the doorway. His fingers were inches from the threshold, and in the light behind his hand, I could see a shadow. Something large, moving in the depths of whatever was beyond that door. I took the photos to Isa. She studied them in silence for a long time. "We need to find this location," she finally said. "Based on the background landmarks, I think it's near where we saw the climber disappear. Same area, maybe 100 yards west. Then let's go, tomorrow, first light." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the doorway, the light, the shadow. Everything I knew about geology said that doorway was impossible. Mount Shasta was solid volcanic rock. There were lava tubes, yes, but nothing like this. Nothing carved with such precision. And the bells that came before people disappeared. I pulled out the old reports again and started mapping them. Every instance of bell sounds, every disappearance. The pattern was clear. The bells would ring for 3 to 7 nights. Then someone would go missing. Always experienced hikers. Always people who knew the mountain well enough to get to remote areas. It was like the mountain was calling them. And they were answering. Around 2 a.m., I heard them again. The bells, resonating through the walls of my cabin. I grabbed my recorder, and this time, I didn't try to capture the sound itself. Instead, I recorded the vibrations in the water glass on my nightstand. The water rippled in perfect concentric circles, and the pattern held steady for the full 7 minutes the bells rang. When I played it back, the ripples formed something. A shape, almost like writing, if writing could exist in 4 dimensions. I took screenshots of the ripple patterns and stared at them until my eyes hurt. There was intelligence here, purpose. This wasn't random seismic activity or acoustic anomalies. This was communication. But who was communicating, and what were they saying? The next morning, Isa and I set out for the location from David's photos. We brought climbing gear, documentation equipment, and every sensor we could get our hands on. Geiger counter, electromagnetic field detector, thermographic camera, the works. We found the spot at 11 a.m., the exact rock face from David's photo, but there was no doorway, just solid stone. Isa placed her hand on the rock. Same warm spot, same smell. I pulled out the EMF detector. The needle went crazy, pegging at the maximum reading. Whatever was causing electromagnetic disturbances was right here, right in this rock. Miko, look at this. Isa was examining the stone surface with a magnifying glass. She gestured for me to look. Under magnification, I could see marks, tiny scratches in the rock, almost microscopic. And they formed patterns, the same geometric patterns I'd seen in David's photo of the doorway interior. Someone carved this, Isa said. A long time ago. Look at the weathering. She was right. The marks were ancient, worn by thousands of years of exposure. But they were definitely intentional. Writing, maybe, or a map. I pulled out David's photos and compared them to the rock face. The geometry matched. The doorway had been here, but it was only visible sometimes. The bells, I said. What if the bells are the key? What if they activate something? Isa looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Activate what? A door in solid rock? I know how it sounds. But look at the evidence. The bells ring. People disappear. David photographed a door that appears and disappears. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. Something is happening here, and it's connected to those bells. Before Isa could respond, we heard voices, hikers, coming up the trail. A group of 4, decked out in New Age gear. Crystals, prayer flags, the works. They were heading for one of the vortex sites that spiritual seekers love to visit. Their leader, a woman in her 50s with long gray hair, stopped when she saw us. "You're rangers," she said. "Have you heard the bells?" Isa and I exchanged glances. "You've heard them too?" I asked. "For 3 nights now. They're beautiful. The Lemurians are calling. The time of emergence is near." I bit back my skepticism. "What do you know about the bells?" The woman smiled serenely. "They've been prophesied for centuries. When the bells of Telos ring 7 times, the underground city will open. The ascended masters will emerge to guide humanity into the new age." 7 times? You're sure about that? It's written in all the ancient texts. Well, the channeled texts. The bells are a sign of awakening. After the group moved on, Isa pulled out her notebook. "If she's right about the 7 times and this is night 3, we have 4 more nights. 4 more chances for people to disappear into whatever is behind that doorway. We need to shut down the mountain, close it to hikers. On what grounds? That we believe in a magical door activated by bells from an underground city? We'd be laughed out of the service." Isa was quiet for a moment. "Then we document everything. And tonight, when the bells ring, we're right here. With cameras, recorders, everything. If that door opens, we're going to be ready." That night, we set up camp 50 feet from the rock face. 2 tents, a full camera array, sensors covering every frequency we could monitor. We also brought weapons. Not our service pistols. Something bigger. Isa had a hunting rifle from her truck, and I'd borrowed a shotgun from a friend. I didn't know what we might encounter, but I wanted to be prepared. The bells started at 11:53 p.m. This time, being so close to the source, the sound was overwhelming. It wasn't just audio, it was physical. The vibrations went through my body, making my organs resonate in sympathy. I could feel my heartbeat synchronizing with the harmonic pattern. And the rock face began to glow. Not brightly, just a faint luminescence, starting at the points where those microscopic carvings were. The patterns lit up in blue-white light, spreading across the stone like a circuit diagram coming to life. Isa was filming, her hands shaking, but her camera steady. "Oh my God, Mikko, are you seeing this?" The light patterns connected, forming the outline of that rectangular doorway. And then, impossible as it seemed, the rock face began to recede. Not opening like a door, not sliding aside. The stone itself was becoming translucent, fading, thinning until I could see through it. And beyond it, I saw Telos, not a city of light and crystal like the New Age seekers imagined. This was older, darker. A vast cavern stretching down into the mountain's depths, lit by bioluminescent fungi and strange crystalline formations that pulsed with their own internal light. And standing in the doorway, looking out at us with eyes that had seen millennia pass, was a being that was almost human. Almost. He was tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that seemed to shift between pale and translucent. His eyes were too large, too deep, and they held an expression that I can only describe as profound sorrow. When he spoke, his voice was the bells, multiple tones, harmonizing, creating words in the spaces between sounds. "You should not have come. The seals are weakening. The bells call not in welcome, but in warning. Tell your kind to stay away from the mountain. What we guard must never wake." Then the doorway began to fade, the rock solidifying again, and the being spoke one last sentence before he vanished. "It's listening now. It knows you're here, and it's so very hungry." The doorway closed, the bells stopped, and Isa and I were left in the darkness, our cameras full of footage that would change everything we thought we knew about the world. Or would have if the footage hadn't been completely blank. Every camera, every recorder, every sensor. All of them had been running. All of them showed recording indicators. But when we checked them, there was nothing. Just static. Just empty files. Except for one thing. Isa's notebook, where she'd been taking written notes. The paper was covered in writing, but not her handwriting. The letters were different, angular, in an alphabet neither of us recognized. And at the bottom of the page, in English, written in what looked like her handwriting but couldn't be, was a single sentence. 7 nights, 7 seals. What comes after must never reach the surface. We sat there until dawn, trying to process what we'd seen, what it meant. The being had said they were guarding something that must never wake, but the bells were warnings, and if I understood correctly, the seals were weakening. Something was waking up, and we had 4 more nights to figure out what to do about it. As the sun rose over Mount Shasta, I looked at Isa. "We're going back tonight. Same spot. We need to understand what's happening. And if that thing in the doorway is right, if we should stay away, then we're already involved. And if 7 seals are breaking, we need to know what happens when the 7th one fails." I didn't know it then, but I just committed us to the most terrifying 4 days of our lives. Because what we'd seen was just the beginning. The real horror was still waiting, far below, in the depths where the bells were ringing, and it was waking up. We spent the day researching everything we could find about Telos, Lemuria, and the mythology of Mount Shasta. Most of it was New Age material, channeled messages from ascended masters, descriptions of crystal cities and enlightened beings. But buried in the folklore, we found something else. Older stories from the Modoc and Wintu tribes who'd lived on the mountain for thousands of years. They had a different name for what lived inside the mountain. Not Lemurians. Not ascended masters. They called them the Watchers. And they said the Watchers weren't there by choice. They were prisoners, bound to guard something that had come from the stars long before humans walked the earth. The tribal elders wouldn't speak directly about it. It was forbidden knowledge, dangerous even to acknowledge. But one elder, a Modoc man in his 90s, told me something that made my blood run cold. My grandfather told me that when the mountain sings, you must not answer. The songs are beautiful, but they are chains. The Watchers sing because they must, to keep the sleeper bound. But every song weakens them, and when they can sing no more, what they guard will rise. How many songs? I asked. How many before they can't hold it anymore? 7 songs, each for 7 nights. That's what the old stories say. After the 49th bell, the binding breaks, the sleeper wakes, and the Watchers are released from their duty, whether their task is complete or not. I did the math. We'd heard bells on 3 nights. If the pattern held, we had 4 more nights. 28 more bells. Then the 49th would ring, and whatever was down there would be free. I tried to convince Isa that we should report this up the chain, get the mountain closed, call in the experts. She just looked at me. Report what, Miko? That we saw a magic door? That a tall, pale man told us something was waking up? We have no evidence. Just a notebook with writing we can't read, and a story from tribal elders about ancient prisoners. So what do? We go back tonight. We document everything we can, and if that doorway opens again, we go through it. We find out what's really down there. That's insane. Probably. But we're rangers. We protect this mountain and everyone on it. If there's a real threat, we need to understand it, and we have 4 nights to do it. That evening, we prepared differently. In addition to cameras and sensors, we brought climbing gear designed for cave systems. Rope, carabiners, harnesses, lights. If we made it through the doorway, we needed to be ready for anything. We also brought something else. Isa had contacted a friend of hers, a professor of ancient languages at UC Berkeley. She'd sent him photos of the writing from her notebook. He'd called back an hour ago. He says it's not like anything he's seen before, Isa told me as we hiked up to our position. But there are similarities to Proto-Sumerian, to Harappan script, to symbols found in the Göbekli Tepe ruins. He thinks it might be pre-Diluvian, from before the last ice age. That's impossible. Writing doesn't go back that far. That's what he said too. But the symbols exist. Someone carved them. And if the mythology is right, if Lemuria existed and sank 12,000 years ago, then whoever's down there might be old enough to have been there when it happened. We reached our position at 10 p.m. The rock face looked normal in the darkness, just another piece of Mount Shasta's southern slope. But we both knew what it could become. The bell started at 11:53 p.m., exactly the same time as the night before. The precision was unsettling. Whatever was controlling this operated on a schedule that didn't waver by even a second. The harmonics washed over us, and once again the rock began to glow. The patterns illuminated, spreading like veins of light across the stone, and the doorway formed, the rock becoming translucent, then transparent, then simply absent. The being from the night before was there, standing in the threshold. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, I could see others, dozens of them, all tall,